The Gophers are making a name for themselves in the NFL, and I think that trend is going to continue.
You are Locked On Golden Gophers.
No matter what we're going to do here, we're just going to keep rowing.
Your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
However it turns out, we're just going to keep rowing.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We're just going to keep rowing, and keep rowing.
You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. And today we're talking a lot about the NFL draft with the Minnesota Golden Gophers, because we're going to talk about the players who will possibly be drafted this year, maybe potentially have a chance to sneak in, and then also who is still on the radar for next year's draft on this Gophers roster. But then we got to talk about the guys who are actually in the NFL and how they are doing. Last year might have been the best year for the Gophers alums in the NFL. We're going to dive into it and why that is a great thing for future Gophers being drafted as well. So sit back, relax, be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube so you don't miss any of this daily Gophers content moving forward. But thank you so much for making Minnesota Gopher, Locked On Golden Gophers, your first listen when it comes to Gophers daily sports. Now, let's talk about this year's draft, because there are definitely two names at the top of the radar that many folks know will probably be drafted from this Gophers team, but are there others that could make the cut as well? I think there's one that maybe could put his name into consideration, and then a couple others that, depending on how the pro days and everything like that go, maybe they could be UDFAs, maybe they could sneak into the back half. But I think overall the realistic projection is 2 to 3 Gophers could be drafted in this year's NFL draft. Now, the number one is Tyler Nubin, plain and simple, an All-American across many platforms, a multi-All Big Ten team. I believe he was first team this year. He was second team last year. Tyler Nubin has only progressively gotten better and better and better every single year. And he was entering people's draft radar last season. People thought he would have got drafted, but he decided he wanted to return and boost his draft stock. And he is literally right on the verge of being a first-round pick or a second-round pick. I don't think he falls any further than that. But how does he get himself into that first-round category? Well, he did what he had to on the field. He ended up setting the program record for interceptions. He was out there a difference maker on defense. Now, he kind of sometimes played a little bit of hero ball, and maybe that got him a couple of negative marks this year, not in the scouting perspective, but just in some of the ending of game situations this year where the Gophers maybe dropped the ball as a unit, not just Tyler Nubin, but as an entire unit. But regardless, Tyler Nubin had a fantastic season this year, probably his best to date. And on top of that, he is definitely woken up a lot of folks. I've seen Field Yates tweet about him. I've seen Connor Rogers tweet about him. All of them excited about how much potential this guy has and how he could potentially be the number one safety in this draft class. Now, you've got him, you've got Cam Kitchens. I think those two players are kind of at the top of the list when it comes to safety prospects in this draft class. And Tyler Nubin could definitely make a case for himself. Now, he's performing out at the Senior Bowl this week, so that should help boost his draft stock if he continues to show out down there. Plus, he'll be a guy that will be invited to the NFL Combine. Plus, he'll be a guy who has a pro day. So you've got 3 opportunities in this pre-draft process to show up, show out, and show the dog that you are. And the thing is, the one thing I've noticed about Tyler Nubin while covering this team is that he is great in an interview. He has the charisma, he has the character, he has the leadership, he has all that, and it stands out the second you're interviewing with him. But on top of that, he gives his all. He shows what he has every second he's not on the field. It's not just on Saturdays when he's playing the game. Every practice that you go, you see him going 100%. You see him flying to the ball. You see him making changing plays. You see him firing up his teammates. That's just who he is. He's got that dog in him, and he is a guy who I have no doubt will be helped by this draft process. So I think Tyler Nubin's going to make a case to be in that back half of the first round, or maybe one of the first 5 or 6 picks in the second round. That's how special Tyler Nubin is and can be moving forward. So Tyler Nubin is a lock to be drafted in this NFL draft, plain and simple. Everybody and their mama knows it's going to happen. But then you move over to the next draft hopeful, who I believe is also a lock to be drafted, and you have Tristyn Spann-Ford. Now, if you listen to some fantasy football analysts out there, they're going to tell you, oh, this guy, he could be undrafted. He could be a 7th round. Nah, I wouldn't listen to all of that because they don't understand the aspects of how a player contributes besides some fantasy points. And you know what? We can look beyond that. Tristyn Spann-Ford is the best blocking tight end in this draft, bar none. And yes, his PFF grades might have been lower in the 2023 season, but they are also an all-time high in 2022. And if you talk to NFL scouts, if you talk to some of the different scouting personnel that are with some of these larger networks, they'll tell you what he put on tape this year was still really phenomenal with what he had last year. So he has more than made a case for his strengths in the blocking department, and he knows that as well. Now, 2 years ago, 2022, he had his best receiving year. Over 400 yards, almost 500 yards, multiple touchdowns. And that was a year where you're like, man, he could go out now and he could probably be like a 4th round draft pick or so. And he came back and he was trying to boost that draft stock. And honestly, I think with a higher receiving production, he probably would have boosted that draft stock. But the Gophers and Brevyn, they just, as much as he is loyal to them, it felt like they just didn't want to use him in the capacity that they could have. But at the same time, there were times then where his confidence seemed like it was down, and then there were some drops. So overall, not his greatest year on the receiving side of things. I'm not going to butter it up or anything like that. But Tristyn Spann-Ford is going to be drafted, and he's going to be a valuable asset for some team, depending on if he fits into the right system. If he lands into the right system is what I'm looking for there. I think the ideal type of team is like what you see with the 49ers, with George Kittle, where blocking is a heavy premises, but then on top of that, they work into your strengths. Now, George Kittle was a 5th round pick. Like, you don't have to be a 1st round guy like Brock Bowers to be able to contribute. But I think regardless, I think Brevyn's game should translate better to the NFL than it has in college. And the reason I think that is not because he didn't have that heavy level production in the receiving game in college, even though I think that is more to blame on the Gophers and their staff and not using him in that capacity. But he had some drops this year, plain and simple. He did. And he wants to go out there and prove in these preseason or off-season draft, pre-draft process that he has the hands, and he wants to prove that catching is a strength of his. And the thing is, he can do that. If he can go out in the Senior Bowl, he can go out in the combine, and he can go out in his pro day. And if he shows in those 3 different settings that, look, I can catch the ball, look, I can make these grabs, which I have seen him make some phenomenal grabs in practice. We've seen him make some phenomenal grabs in the 2022 season and a limited amount in the 2023 season. We know the talent is there. But if he goes out and he shows that consistency and catches the ball and plays with that confidence in this pre-draft process, he will only help his draft stock. He has the chance to make teams go, why didn't the Gophers use this guy more? Why didn't they have him posting up in the red zone and playing a one-on-one contested ball up to him? Why didn't they throw up a fade to him? Why didn't they use him in this manner? And that's the thing we know about NFL coaches, is that they see opportunity. They see intangibles. They'll see 6'6", 6'6.5", 6'7", and 260 some pounds. That's athletic, that can run, that can break tackles, and they'll see like, whoa, there's clay here. There's good clay here. And why has this not been molded at the college level? I feel like, and that should play in his favor. So there's a big thing there. If he can show out in this pre-draft process, I do think he can put himself into that early day 3 type round, maybe sneaking into round or day 2. But I think the best case scenario is probably early day 3, unless he really shows out, really balls out in the pre-draft process and can sneak into the back half of day 2. But regardless, Tristyn Spann-Ford is going to be a draft pick, plain and simple. It's going to happen. So those are your top 2. But a name I think could sneak into consideration is Trayvon Jones. Trayvon Jones played very well for the Gophers this past season. He only had 1 year with them, but one thing you have noticed with Gophers in the NFL in the last couple seasons is that they have found a propensity to get good defensive backs that have been translating to the NFL well. You're talking about Terrell Smith, you're talking about Jordan Howden, you're talking about Benjamin St-Juste, you're talking about multiple players that have found ways to be successful NFL players and get starting opportunities, get heavy snaps, get tackles and production. And I think Trayvon Jones made a good case for himself. He played really well at Elam prior to this, and then he comes over to the Gophers. It translates, and he could maybe, with a good pro day, show out and be able to put himself into consideration for maybe a late pick, maybe a seventh round pick. Otherwise, I believe he is going to be an undrafted free agent. He'll be able to find an opportunity with the team because he has the talent and the intangibles to do it. So I think he's a name to keep watch for that could maybe sneak into this draft. Other players that are in this draft class that'll probably try to get on it with the team as a UDFA or get a training camp invite. I think Brady Weeks is going to be a high player in this long snapping game for the Gophers and getting onto a team. Corey Crooms has the opportunity, depending on how he shows out at his pro day. And then on top of that, you've got Chris Ottman-Bell, who played in the Tropical Bowl, Nathan Bowe at the center position, which is still a need for many teams, and you always need to stack talent. Kyler Baugh, Chris Collins, and Sean Tyler. All those players are going to be fighting for a training camp spot, possibly trying to get a UDFA spot, and that's an undrafted free agent for those who are like, what is a UDFA? But regardless, the Gophers have a lot of names in contention for maybe getting onto a roster, 3 that maybe have contention of getting drafted, and 2 that should be drafted in this next draft. But who are guys on the radar for 2025? There's a lot that could boost their draft stock in this next year. We're going to talk about them coming up next. First, I got to talk to you about our fans over at FanDuel because guess what? It is time for the Super Bowl. It's hard to imagine. I can't believe we're already crossing into February, but it is true. And now is the time to celebrate that with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because if you're like me, the Super Bowl is all about finding the best seat on the couch. I ain't got money like that to go out to the Super Bowl, but you can grab your favorite football snacks and place some super bets. And guess what? You can do that and more with FanDuel and take advantage of who wins the coin toss or who's going to score the first touchdown. And on top of that, you get to watch the commercials. I still, to this day, have that Doritos commercial with the little baby who smacks his hand and he says, "No, keep your hands off my Doritos and keep your hands off my mama." Those are just the things that give me flashbacks to the Super Bowl. I don't know what your favorite Super Bowl moment, favorite Super Bowl commercial is, but feel free to drop it in the comments below. But FanDuel has so many ways to end the season with a dub or 2 or 3. There's so many things that you can bet on in this Super Bowl and take away from it, not only to bet on Super Bowl 58 and its winner, but also who can score a touchdown or how many points will be scored total. All that and so much more. And now new customers will get $200 in bonus bets for the first $5 bet or more that wins. So if you place a bet of $5 or more and it wins, you will get $200 in bonus bets. That's over at fanduel.com/lockedon. So just go to fanduel.com/lockedon and take advantage of that bet and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Gophers fans, let's talk about who's on the draft radar for 2025 because I think there's a handful of guys that are very likely to be drafted and some guys that could play themselves into the conversation. So let's talk about those very likelies first. We're going to talk about Cody Lindenberg at the top of that list. Now, Minnesota has had a history of some linebacker success, and lately their alumni have been showing out in the NFL. You talk about Jack Gibbons, you talk about Devondre Campbell, you talk about breakout star Blake Cashman for the Texans this past year, just to name a few. Now, Coach Fleck has given Cody Lindenberg all the high praise. His talent has shown. He has the athleticism, he has the speed, he has the strength. So has the possibility to be the best of the bunch when it comes to the linebackers coming from Minnesota's program. The biggest question for Cody Lindenberg is health. If Cody can go out there this season and put together a fully healthy season where he can go dominate and he can be productive and he can just be Cody Lindenberg for a full season, not only should he easily lead this team in tackles for the 2024 year, but he should be in the running for an all Big Ten team and be of high draft interest. And also, he's a great character guy. He is a great in the locker room, great leader. So overall, he'll do great in the off the field side of things when it comes to the NFL. But if he can put together a fully healthy season, it will show many NFL teams who will have interest in him. Now, the next player that is very likely to be drafted in the 2025 draft year is Ja Joyner. Now, he has been a nightmare for creating pressures in the Big Ten. Now, in 2022, he didn't convert a lot of those pressures to sacks, but he was a leader in pressures. I believe he was top 5 or so in the entire conference. Then you turn the page to 2023, and he had a lot more sacks while maintaining a monster pressure rate. And plus, I believe he was in the entire country when it comes to Power 5 schools across the entire country, which are the top schools in the FBS. Let's just be plain and simple. Yes, there's a few G5s that squeak their way into the conversation, but the best of the best is in the Power 5. And in the Power 5, he had the third highest pass rush win rate in the entire country, only behind Leatu Latu and Abdul Carter, both names that have been heavy in draft conversations, both for this year and for the future. So absolutely believe he's going to be on a draft board for multiple teams with a similar season or even a slight progression in next season, which he definitely could have working with Coach Debo in his second year. I think that he will have many NFL organizations seriously interested in his pass rushing abilities come next draft. Now, another player on that very likely, the last of my very likelies for next year is Justin Wally. Now, Wally has been on draft radars since his stellar freshman year, and he had a fairly good sophomore year as well. Now, last year there were some struggles, there were some ups and downs, but there were also flashes of brilliance, turnover creation, leadership on the field. So overall, Justin Wally is still definitely in draft consideration and on some radars. He's back in 2024, and if he can get put back together a nice year, a really good year for him, I think he will definitely continue to gain interest. Now, even with a moderate year or a somewhat middling year next season, I still believe Justin Wally will be in the conversation of a similar range, maybe to what we saw from Jordan Howden or Terrell Smith in that 5th round conversation or so. So Justin Wally will be a name for draft radars, but he can definitely increase his stock this season. Now let's move to 3 players I think are possibilities for the NFL draft next year. The first one at the top of that list is Daniel Jackson. He's a top wide receiver in the conference, and I'm going to be really curious to see how Isaiah Williams from Illinois does, because Isaiah Williams was the wide receiver this year that had maybe the stats just above him within the Big Ten. You had Marvin Harrison, who led the entire conference. Then you had Isaiah Williams, and then you had Daniel Jackson and Will Pauling from Wisconsin that were the top 4 guys in this last season when it came to receiving production in almost every single category. So Daniel Jackson, Will Pauling will both be back next year. But how Isaiah Williams, who did enter the draft conversation for this season, how he gets looked at, how he is evaluated. Now, yes, they have different skill sets, but what range he falls into could be a realistic outlook for Daniel Jackson moving forward to the 2025 draft. And I could see Daniel Jackson getting a similar level of interest. That being said, if Daniel Jackson gets the opportunity to put up major numbers with Max Brosmer and they connect on some explosives that maybe we didn't hit on in 2023 and they do that consistently, then this could be a very interesting conversation. I think Daniel Jackson's route running has been on a notice for a lot of teams, especially how he opened the year with Nebraska last year. And his separation could definitely play some interest to teams out there, but he could boost his stock this year depending on what happens. Now, another team or player on the possibly for me is Ariante Ursary. Ursary was the number 5 best graded offensive tackle in the country by PFF last year. And he was also the 5th highest graded in run blocking among Power 5 schools last year. So he definitely has caught the eye of people who are consistently watching film and out there trying to grade film or grade players. But on top of that, he's a left tackle who keeps his quarterback protected, and he's going to have the chance to protect Max Brosmer this season. And he can absolutely continue to climb in draft interest if he keeps consistency. That's going to be the word of the Gophers season, in my opinion, is consistency. If this team can put some consistency together, the ceiling is very high for them. Now, his name will probably most likely be the top of the list for the offensive lineman on the Gophers team. And then finally, the last one for the possibly category for me is Jack Henderson. His size, his skill set, his athleticism, his production all showed well in 2023. And there should be no question about it that he will at least get a shot. Now, he created turnovers. He led the team in tackles. And that is after making the jump from an FCS program where he absolutely dominated. He's coming back for year 2. And this system will be a little bit different with Coach Heatherman, but also fairly similar. So he's going to be more instinctual in his play. He's going to be able to play even faster. And on top of that, yes, there may be some tweaks and changes, but I think those tweaks and changes with Coach Heatherman should only play to the favor of Jack Henderson in that nickel and linebacker type role at times. That is something that Coach Heatherman coaches specifically. So I think it could definitely help him. So those 6, I think, are definitely going to be on draft radars with the potential for all 6 of them to be drafted. But I think 3 are a very likely lock. Now, with a big season, there's still other Gophers that can get in consideration. Max Brosmer, Ethan Robinson, the corner who's transferring in, Quinn Carroll, and Tyler Cooper. I think those 4 players are also on draft radars. And with a very big season, they definitely can make some noise and put themselves into the conversation. Am I missing anybody? Who else do you think could be in next year's draft class? I haven't named Darius Taylor because clearly he's not eligible for the draft next year, but there's multiple players that could be beyond that are in the Gophers draft conversation. But who are guys do you think could be drafted next season? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below, but then also we're going to talk about how the Gophers have been showing out in the NFL and it is helping this program. We're going to talk about that coming up next. First, I want to talk to you about our friends over at Jase Medical because I know we come here to escape from real life and talk sports because realities in real life right now can be crazy. But can we just talk for a minute about preparing for real life? Because according to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics and like amoxicillin right now in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. And that can be scary. But I can't imagine feeling more helpless than my significant other or one of my kids getting sick and while a supply chain shortage is keeping them from life-saving antibiotics or medication that they need. Thankfully, we're all right over here because of Jase Medical. The Jase case, which is their number one product, is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial infections, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among many more. And that stuff could happen to potentially anybody. So definitely visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter, and it will be reviewed by a board certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important than today. So definitely go to jasemedical.com. Again, that's jasemedical.com. And with that, you can use promo code Locked On to get $20 off your order. Promo code Locked On over at jasemedical.com and take advantage today. All right, Gophers fans, we're wrapping it up with why the NFL players that were Golden Gopher alums have been showing out, and that's why we could see potential benefits from them playing so well. Let's talk about how they've been doing, though, because I think this year might have been some of the most success we have seen from Gophers players in the NFL in quite some time. You talk about 2 guys that led the Chargers past season. You have to start it off by talking about Antoine Winfield Jr. He was an all-pro player in the NFL, which is massive because it's not only recognized by his fellow players, by fellow coaches, but also just by the world at large that he is one of the best players at his position in the entire NFL. Now, it shows 122 tackles, 6 sacks, 6 forced fumbles, 4 fumble recoveries, 3 interceptions. He literally did it all. Everything you can possibly do. He had production in every category. Antoine Winfield Jr. definitely led the charge and has been impressing. And hopefully that will continue to get more future safeties like Coy Parrish and others looks from the Gophers program to the NFL, because people are going to say, especially if he can continue to do that at an elite rate, people are going to say, where did he come from? How did we miss him? Where do we find the next one? And so they might be looking for someone. And you know what? We've got a young guy coming in that definitely could step into that type of role. Now, another guy who led the charge this year was Blake Cashman, and it's taken some while. He was an undrafted guy. He is a character guy. He kept pushing. He has work ethic, and that has been the staple of what linebackers have been here with Coach Fleck at Minnesota. Now, Blake Cashman last year for the Houston Texans, he's been dealing with injuries on and off throughout his career, but last year absolutely balled out, 106 tackles, 2 sacks and an interception, and was definitely one of the leaders for this Texans defense led by D'Amico Ryan. And D'Amico Ryan, a linebacker himself, showed a lot of trust in Blake Cashman and his leadership and his ability, and he's gonna be there long term, which is a big thing for Cashman being at like age 27 right now. So he can continue to produce and thrive in that role, and that only should help future guys like a Cody Lindenberg, because Cody Lindenberg is stepping into that opportunity, and if he stays healthy and shows out, people are gonna be like, man, the Gophers had him, they had Lindenberg, and they had this next guy on the list, Jack Gibbons, who was also an undrafted guy playing at Tennessee. He had 95 tackles last season and a sack in only 14 games before getting injured and heading to the IR. So the Gophers have had some definite success, and people are going to stop looking at these guys as gems and undrafted guys and start taking shots on them, especially. And so Cody Lindenberg could be at the forefront of that charge. So we've talked about two linebackers, we talked about a safety, and another safety in that category who got starting opportunities this year was Jordan Howden, who was a 5th-round draft pick. He played in New Orleans with the Saints, played 16 games, but he came along as a starter, had 43 tackles, 1 sack, and a forced fumble. That's not too bad for a 5th-round draft pick who ended up playing into a starter role with Tyrann Mathieu and others playing beside him. Then you got Terrell Smith, another D-back, Chicago. He was a rookie. He had some injuries on and off. He had sickness that kept him off the field, but he played in 12 games, came up with some starts, had 49 tackles, 1 forced fumble, and a fumble recovery on the same play. And it just shows you the fire these guys bring, the difference making these guys bring. And these are guys who weren't the highly drafted, highly coveted guys, but on top of that, they've played into starter roles. And that's where people will start to take notice. Is like it's not just one of these guys doing it and they were just an elite talent. It's multiple guys stepping up. We've talked about 2 undrafted linebackers, 2 5th-round pick DBs, and all these guys are stepping up into big roles. That should be massive for the Gophers' future program, because people are going to start looking like, man, there's a lot of guys that are continuing to come up. In fact, there are 17 players on the NFL rosters. There might be a couple more actually that are within those practice squads and whatnot, but 17 on the actual rosters. 2 others I want to talk about. Boye Mafe last year. He's on the defensive line, 52 tackles for Seattle, 9 sacks. 9 sacks. Definitely took a leap up from his 3 sacks in his rookie year. So he's showing he can be an edge rushing maniac as well, plus 1 forced fumble and 2 fumble recoveries. And then finally, Benjamin St-Juste, a defensive back again, 67 tackles last year, 1 sack, 2 forced fumbles, 1 interception. So the Gophers are finding a ton of production, especially in multiple players, and that should definitely jumpstart the looks and the scouts that are going to be interested in continuing to look at this Minnesota team. Then you talk about you had John Michael Schmidt starting for the Giants all year. Rashad Bateman started. Devondre Campbell started. O'Keefe got starts. Daniel Faalele played this year. Carter Coughlin, Tyler Johnson, Eric Murray, Thomas Rush, and Asezi Atomewu. The Gophers have been in a very healthy spot with their draft development over the last few years, and Tyler Nubin and Brevyn Spann-Ford could definitely find themselves contributing in the near future as well. The more success that these Gophers have, the more organizations are going to look at the Gophers program. So the continued success is a blessing that keeps on giving to this Gophers program and the current generation of Gophers players. Minnesota definitely has a big season in 2024 that they need to bounce back from the struggles of 2023. All of that being said, the player development is very clear and very prominent here with the Gophers under Coach Fleck and his staff, and hopefully we'll continue to see that trending upwards over the coming season. That's going to do it for us on today's episode of Locked On Golden Gophers. I hope you appreciated it. Be sure to hit subscribe, leave a like, and comment below your thoughts on today's show, what you liked, what you want to change, and definitely let me know any questions. We're going to get a mailbag going again. It's been a minute since we've had one, so drop those in the comments below, but I will see you tomorrow where we might have 2 shows. We might have one in the morning, one in the night, so definitely stay tuned. I'll see you then. Row the boat, Sky Ma, go Gophers, and don't forget to subscribe.